This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
And good morning this morning. This is C.A. Nuri, and this is On the Clock with Erin Greene. Erin Greene is on with me via Zoom, and I shall be joining us shortly. But I'll read this, that the day is Monday, March 27, 2023. And on the clock, we engage organizations, institutions, social and cultural, and ordinary people to better understand the impact of public policy, private sector development, and emerging social and consumer trends. On the clock, we have conversations that help us to understand and navigate a rapidly changing Bahamas. Today, Erin and I will be speaking about inclusion and exclusion. And of course, she's going to go in detail on what that exactly means. Like, what do you mean? Inclusion. And what do you mean exclusion? And we'll be talking about access to Bahamian things, access to government, access to political codes, access to the benefits that the Bahamas should offer Bahamians. So that's going to be the general thesis of what we're going to discuss now. But I'll let Erin do some housekeeping and then we'll start that discussion. Erin, are you there?
Good morning this morning, Mr. Nuri. How you doing?
I'm always good. How are you feeling today, by the way?
I am good. The foot is getting better.
So that means any minute now you can hippity hop upstairs and join me personally and to do the introduction by yourself.
Okay, don't let my doctor hear you. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. They're recommending a little more downtime. But I tell them I got to get to the studio, man.
You have things to do. You have things to do, man.
Mind you, what technology has done, right? Technology has allowed me to work from home, which I'm extremely grateful for. What I'm grateful for as well is I'm grateful for the community of people with disabilities and what it is they have shown us, throughout the most intense parts of the pandemic. In fact, we relied on the strategies that disabilities had to devise for themselves, had to demand through lobbying and advocacy to ensure that they can be included, right, in the economy, that they can be included in the workforce, that they can be included in social and cultural life. And so I am grateful for that and their struggle that even though only temporarily disabled, to continue to go to work. And I think, that may be the beginning of our discussion on inclusion and exclusion, and now that we are transitioning away from the most intense parts of the pandemic, which were the lockdowns and the severe restriction of movement, it's important that we don't forget, right? We don't forget how we benefited, right? How we were included because of the measures put in place on behalf of, for, and by people living with disabilities. But now that we're here, let's not forget that they still require accessibility, right? Let's not forget that we need to do both virtual and real-time meetings, that we can do them, that it's very easy to include people, right? That's what they've shown us. How easy it is to include people, how detrimental it is to exclude people.
But whose job it is, Erin, to include people with disabilities, and especially the general living in the Bahamas?
Like, whose role is it?
Yeah, and the reason why I ask, right? I see the sidewalks. The sidewalks isn't disability friendly. You know,
Right.
there are holes in the middle of the sidewalk, and when I said holes, I mean gaps, not cracks that cause holes. I talk about gaps that was left there by the persons who constructed it. That if you traverse, if you're blind walking on the sidewalk, you will fall in a hole because there's a gap in the sidewalk, incomplete, whatever it is. In some government buildings, some private buildings, there aren't any handicap access, no wheelchair access to get in there. So I ask you again, whose responsibility is this? Oh, I hear you talking about access. The conversation we're having today is about access and inclusion. But we know type of inclusive type persons.
Well, listen, so whose obligation is it? Whose duty is it? It's all of ours, right? I think there's political and legal duty. There is an economic obligation, and there is a social cultural obligation, right? To ensure accessibility. We have legislation actually that requires that public businesses are disability accessible, right? Or have mobility accessibility. So there are provisions for the number of disabled parking spots that should be made available in private and public parking lots, right? There are provisions, I think, about ramps and other features that should be installed and implemented in public and private establishments for accessibility. So there is the law, and then there are the civil servants that are supposed to enforce the law. And then there are us, then there's us, the people, who are supposed to speak up when we see that these things are not happening. The business community that is supposed to ensure that they are in compliance with the law. Drivers ensure that they are not parked on the sidewalk, right? That they are not blocking pedestrian crossings or blocking the cutouts or the access ways onto sidewalks and off of sidewalks. They must make sure that they maintain or allow for visibility for pedestrians and people using the sidewalk. Then we got another issue where cars will see people on mobility scooters in the road and just ignore them or act like they're stupid for being on the road when they also have a right to be on the road. You see bus drivers who refuse to make way or stop for people with disabilities. The law should ensure that public transportation, right, that those vehicles are modified or upgraded to ensure that people who use wheelchairs or mobility scooters can get them inside the bus to be able to use.
Erin, do we have any jitney that could allow wheelchairs to get on the bus?
I don't think we have. I'm not sure we may think so in the public system, but I know that there are mobility buses in country. Not many. And so, all of these things, this is our obligation to ensure that there's accessibility for everyone.
I hear you. I know. I hear you. Let's continue with our discussion. And our discussion is we need to hash out what accessibility is, what is inclusiveness is. Why is there a need for inclusiveness in the Bahamas? And who is not included or who is being excluded? And why is that? And how do we correct that narrative? I know we start talking about disabilities, right? And we highlighted and you pointed out what is the responsibility of the regular people and, of course, government. But we see that is lacking, right? And then you said that we are duty bound to enforce the accountability of it, right? And I hear that, right? And that's easy to say, but I see where we're lacking. And because I'm going to now highlight places and things and entities that has fallen short in terms of giving access to Bahamians.
Absolutely. You going to start?
No, go ahead. I give it all to you.
No, man, don't do that. Don't do that. I only got 1 foot to carry.
one foot to carry.
But when I thought about it last night and over the weekend, I thought in the title I have for today is Inclusion and Exclusion: The 50th Independence Celebrations, Toby versus RCI and the PM, and the Rise of the COI. Right? I wanted to look at those sort of three examples of how we've missed the opportunity possibly to include people, and how we've created a culture of exclusion sort of evident in these three spaces. But then from last night to this morning, looking at the newspapers, looking at the headline, FNM leader told stay out of constituency. I think that is in today's Nassau Tribune. And looking at the headline for Insight in the Tribune, I think I'm also adding, how does our nation gain from these resort developments? And if we look at these articles, I'm going to list the articles here. PM disturbed by Smith's claim. Protests outside Miami consulate based on false premise, minister says. Even another article in last week's Tribune, report calls for revision of alcohol laws, highlights major health issues. I think throughout all of these articles and these issues, we could get a sense that perhaps the political culture is one of exclusion and not one of inclusion. And that trickles down throughout society, where we've created an environment where we can't even reason with the idea that there is nothing outside of extreme criminal behavior that should exclude a child from school. But here we are excluding children from school because their socks don't match, right? Or their hair is not combed properly. And so I wanted to start with the 50th independence celebrations, if you don't mind, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. So this weekend, they had two fabulous events taking place.
Yes.
The 1973 Masterclass series, The Life and Legacy of Celinda Pinling. And if you were unable to attend, like many people were, fortunately, you can find a link to the recorded event, right? So like the entire event uploaded to Celebrate Bahamas' Facebook page. That's the Independent Secretariat's Facebook page. And then they had the Dame Doris Johnson National Women's Unity March on the Sunday, right? And these were two, I think, great events.
Yes.
What was unfortunate is after the Masterclass series, I noted a number of people asking questions like, were intent out for this, right? Was it by invite only? Was it open to the public? Why didn't I hear about it? Oh, that would have been a lovely event. Oh, I didn't have enough time to organize myself, right? And I tuned into the live feed initially of the Unity March, and it was a lovely setup. I don't think there were enough people out there for the 50th independence celebration. Great idea, short notice, but an obvious indicator that we're not focused on what accessibility really is and how to achieve it, right?
And Erin, I see you gave a couple of good examples, right? And I want you to hash these things out because I always ask you, you need to explain this, right? I'm not going to go back to Toby and COI and even the FNM because you mentioned that, and I'm going to let you bring that in later. But you mentioned the 50th celebration and what they. The announcement was given by the ambassador about what was going to happen, right? She said that the masterclass is going to be open. She invited people in general to the Women's Doris Johnson March, right? And the conversation today is about access and inclusion. Who was excluded in this, or weren't people included in that?
Well, first of all, where were the announcements made?
Well, Guardian Radio.
And how many times?
What?
Okay, then. Now, I love Guardian Radio. I know that thousands of people, thousands tune into Guardian Radio in the Bahamas, in the Bahamian diaspora. But that's still not sufficient. Certainly not for events that are of a national stature and as grand as this. the 50th independence. See, it's not sufficient to say, well, if you're a Bahamian and you have pride, then you're going to figure out what's happening. It's independence. People are still focused on figuring out how to pay light bills that are the same as their mortgages. People are still trying to figure out how to get their children back and forth from school to home with limited transportation options and a dysfunctional public transportation system. People's lives are just too busy. Who is able to listen to the radio when these announcements are being made? Why aren't we using billboards, right? Why aren't we using WhatsApp blasts, right? And media blasts? Why don't we have constant social media programming about the events? They say, if you're marketing an event, this is in the days of flyers, paper flyers. If you are marketing an event, if you're giving out flyers, you got to give out about 300 flyers before you guaranteed one person is going to show up at your event. And so when we apply that to the sense of how much more exaggerated our marketing efforts have to be, it's not just a matter of if you are patriotic, then you're going to figure it out. This is the 50th independence. This is the grandest thing that has happened post-independence. The state should be making every effort to ensure that every Bahamian, regardless of their intellectual acumen or even their interest, is aware of it. In fact, if they treated these things like they treat campaigning, then we would be moving in the right direction.
I have a text here challenging you, Erin. She said, Erin, these events are broadcast every day, every minute. People hear what they want to hear and go where they want to go. Stop making excuses. People see things online all day.
You know, that's really interesting. This morning, I saw social media, and I'm on social media all the time looking for stories of interest, looking for references, right? And this morning, and let me say this, the bigger the institution, the more likely or the less likely it is for them to publish their events as widely as they possibly can. So I'm scrolling through Facebook this morning and I see a flyer from the university, like a post from the University of the West Indies, right? In fact, I was looking at it right now. It is an event they're having, and the post was made this morning, 5 minutes before I saw it, and it was a call for abstracts for a UE conference, and the deadline is the 30th of March.
What do you mean the deadline is the 30th of March? That's next
now,
week.
I'm not saying this is the first time they posted it, right? So I messaged them and I say, hey, is there an extension on the deadline? And it's a couple of days away. And the social media's person's response, very polite, but it basically, this is what they said. Oh, we've been promoting this for 2 weeks now. And I wonder if these massive institutions, see, they move at a snail's pace, but they expect us to engage them with lightning speed. And so, like, accessibility is a real, in fact, and listen, Yuri, professionals, people get paid throughout the developed world, right? To ensure that events, institutions can guarantee accessibility, right? We could even look at the FTX case and we see that some of the senior staff, senior hires in management in FTX, their primary skill and qualification is marketing and accessibility, getting your message out to people, right? And so to the texter, no, sir, one broadcast a week could not be sufficient to guarantee accessibility. And if you know that people are not tuned into your message. They're not tuned into your political culture. Then for national events, you have to go the extra step. You got to go into communities with flyers and walkabouts. You got to call on them same campaign generals that could get Bahamians to paint every corner of New Providence mustard and ketchup colored. Get them to go out there with that same energy to push the message.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a text right here that says, Erin is completely correct. There aren't much effort being put into marketing of anything in this country, especially when the government is putting it on. They believe once they share one flyer and air one ad 1 week before the event, that's good enough. But I understand what you're saying about the 50th anniversary. And there's a quote, I had a friend, especially during the election, who said, big splash, little splash, right? And anniversary is supposed to be a big splash. Everything about it is supposed to be grand, great, superb, right? So knowing having that as a background, right, I can appreciate your point to saying that good enough just isn't good enough, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be big and beyond. It's supposed to be heard all the way in Afghanistan that something big is happening inside the Bahamas, and perhaps we need to give those in power ideas on how it could be done. Perhaps they need to engage in marketing business to assist. But at this present time, it's still little splash.
Now, and watch this. I can understand, right? I can understand this scenario. Government is busy. It's the government. They got 400,000 people to take care of. So the government engages NGOs and special interest groups, right? Like the unions, like the Chamber of Commerce, right? Even like maybe a crisis center, even. Government relies on those agencies and groups to disseminate information. Not just to disseminate information, to mobilize people. Now, you hope that those organizations can mobilize people connected to their organization. But what we're finding is that some organizations can't even mobilize their own members to engage the ideas and initiatives that the government comes to them to announce, right, to the general public. That's like when we hear these major announcements being made at Business Outlook or Chamber of Commerce meeting or groundbreaking, right, in another island. In some instances, those NGOs or special interest groups are expected by the government, having the privilege of being the first to get the information, to then projects, ideas, or campaigns, particularly people, to enforce or implement or introduce these new ideas, policies, or cultures to the country. Right? So I could give the government a little grace, but at some point the government must understand that it is not effectively engaging that process, that the groups that they are relying on are not doing that and are holding information to be able to capitalize on it. And so this idea that if you don't want to know, if you don't know, you don't want to know is elitist, is classist, and we got to do away with it in a democracy.
Look where you're going. Look where you're going. But you mentioned democracy now, right? And not wanting to switch gears because I understand what you're saying, and I'm willing to challenge you that the information is out. But like you said, big splash, little splash. But earlier you mentioned the COI. Right. Earlier you mentioned Toby. Earlier you mentioned in terms of access, and perhaps we're not doing a good of job we could have do or should be doing in terms of access. How isn't the COI getting access? We let them come on the radio all the time, right? Well, not here, but I mean the idea is they have access. What more access does the political party COI need? Right? Why? I mean, they are being engaged. They are being entertained. And I know we're talking about access and stuff like that. And I want you to explain what you mean by that.
All right. So when I talk about the rise of the COI, see, if you focus on the COI, then you've lost the plot. In fact, the point is that the COI would not rise if political culture and the political class was more accessible or operated in different ways. The COI has risen because so many people feel excluded from political life, from governance, from decision making. That is why we see this sort of slightly meteoric, like as if BPL used to create meteors, right? Rise of the COI. It is a result of a lack of inclusion across the board that we see them. Because the issues that they touch on are issues that people like you and I touch on all the time, that I have been talking about and you have been making commentary on for over a decade. Right? That's not what they're bringing to the table. What they're bringing to the table is a sense of inclusion and belonging. And so that's why I wanted to reference them, right? And so, we have to be very careful to not exclude the people that feel for a COI. We could exclude the COI. We could do the things that we do, ignore, and they don't exist. We could do all of that. But the people who cling to it, who believe it is the only space within which their voice is valid, we got to stop excluding them from public discourse, from the political voice, from politics. Wherever and however power is negotiated, we have to ensure that all voices are included, or we end up with potential fascist ideologies and behaviors taking root in our country.
Erin, I hear you, and I still battling on whether there's a need for a COI political party. I think the FNM and the PLP is enough.
Right? That's a great point. Hold on, that's a great point, right?
I think there's enough.
It's enough what? You think two parties is enough?
Just join those two parties and make a difference within those two parties.
Think about it. If you don't want to be included in these two parties, then you will be excluded from decision making in your own country. Forget the name of the party. Forget that particular party. Is there a space for alternate parties? Is there a space for anyone other than the PLP and the FNM? That there can only be two in the House at one time doesn't mean that there can't be more parties. And it is a mechanism or rhetoric of the political class to convince you of that.
I see you have a caller, Erin. Let's patch the caller through. Producer, patch the caller through for me, please. Go ahead, caller. No, they hang up. Well, the caller hang up. But I have a text here. They call him back now. And a text here says, "Good morning. I listen to Guardian all the time. I'm always on social media. And I can tell you I didn't hear nor see anything about the Women's March. Very sad. I would have loved to be a part of it. And a number of women, especially with the theme Doris Johnson being in front of it, would have participated. But still on the theme of COI and giving them access. And we're debating whether they have enough access. And you're saying that the voices of disenfranchised Bahamian cause the need for a COI, the creation of a COI, right? And I'm saying that those people can join these two major parties and make a difference. And you said, no, they can't make a difference because their voices is being muffled out, right?
So
go ahead.
You don't believe? You don't believe the Tribune headline today then?
Go ahead. Remind me what the Tribune headline was.
F&M leaders told stay out of constituency business.
And that's the next topic, right? And
Right, because
go ahead.
you telling me if if I feel excluded, then go join the F&M or the PLP. The people in the constituency
The executive from the constituency. I don't think
Yes.
they appreciate the narrative they're given the Bahamas in general. How can the executive be out of a constituency a meeting or constituency business when you have a chairman, and the chairman is the one who organizes constituencies, and that the constituencies are created in order to bolster up the executive. That's the purpose of having constituencies.
Is it really?
No, then you tell me if you have a contrary.
I mean, because just because they call it an executive committee doesn't necessarily mean that it's born out of or its job is to solely support and be dictated to by the executive of the party. But I think this is a perfect example, Yuri, to expound, right? That even within those two parties, people are telling you they are excluded, not just from decision making, but decision making that should sit within their realm of. And I would suggest to you that there's a larger culture, right? There's a larger culture. And it's that culture that results in people feeling disenfranchised and then creates the opportunity, right? Then creates an environment in which opportunists can take advantage of that frustration and that sentiment.
Okay, let's see if we can engage with this caller here and there. Caller, can you hear me? We having issues today. And let's talk F&M then. And we see there's... Go ahead.
You want me to read from the article?
I can want you to read from the article. There seems to be a disconnect between the F&M executive and the constituency branches. You see there has been turmoil again and again, and now it's boiling over that regular behemoths are seeing this disconnect, right? I come from an old system where I expected the executive to basically inform and bolster up the constituency level. I've never seen such an aggressive constituency branch and the challenging of the direction of the political party ever. I'm not sure if that's healthy. And you mentioned the COI in terms of access, and now we're talking about the F&M in terms of access and access to management, access to leadership, access to direction. And I'm not sure if it's access or ego or lack of access, or is ego that's being played here. But yes, go ahead and read the article.
All right, so in today's Tribune, F&M leaders told stay out of constituency business. The assistant chaplain of the Free National Movement wants F&M leaders to stop interfering in constituency association affairs. In an internal communication leaked to the Tribune, Kevin Harris, who is also a former director of BIS, Bahamas Information Services, also criticized Deputy Chairman Don Sanders for attending last week's Mount Moriah constituency meeting, where he publicly argued with the Carmichael Constituency Association chairman. Attracted attention after leaders reportedly tried to block former Minister Hubert Minnis, former Prime Minister, from speaking at Constituency Association meetings. I landed there.
And I would get a smile, Erin. I can smile. I can smile, and it's still using the theme access and inclusion and exclusion, right? And knowing that Kevin Harris, good gentleman, is a Hubert Minnis supporter, right? I am concerned about the narrative that he's putting out there, as if he doesn't understand the establishment and how the establishment works, and whether this is good for the party in terms of even debating the terms of access. Surely there's protocols on how to maneuver this. And I will ask you this, right? The deputy chairman should be able to, all chairmen should be able to attend any constituency branch. I would assume that that's the connection to the.
I mean, sure, they could attend, without having seen the F&M party constitution, I can imagine that they can attend, but do they have decision-making capacity? Are they allowed to speak on behalf of the executive or the constituency body? Are they allowed to speak on behalf of them? What happens if you were sent to the meeting to make media statements only, right? What if a precedent had already been set within the party in regards to Hubert Alexander Ingram's continuing role in the party after the 2012 defeat? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What if constituency executives are saying, oh no, we're going to do the same thing that you insisted that Ingram could do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What if that's what's going on? But what the main point of focusing on that is, though, to suggest, well, to ask the question, is access, right, and power,
Mm-hmm.
do we use exclusion? Do we exclude people as an act of power, right? And is that problematic? And do we see that playing out in many ways, right? I see it playing out all the time, where I am often chastised or admonished by silence. Ask for information, you can't get it. You're too biggity.
Mm-hmm.
You ask too many questions. You're so smart, go figure it out on your own. It's a power, right? It's a power dynamic or mechanism we use. And if we're doing it at the top, at the very top, then what do we expect to trickle down throughout the business world, the professional sectors, and society as a whole?
So you're trying to say exclusion is a culture for us?
Exclusion as an operation of power is a culture for us.
So you're trying to say the inclusion is selective, being biased? That only a certain set of people are included in the governance?
Inclusion as a function of power is a practice here. I mean, look at it in policy. When a party loses power, all of their appointments have to resign and leave shop. You are now excluded from the discussion.
I have go ahead, Erin. It looks like we got to take a break, but I want to read this, and I'm going to come back onto this, right? This text says, Erin, please keep fighting. Only you and the young guy that has the Saturday radio show means to get that this rampant capitalism and elitism will destroy us. We cannot follow the bigger countries. They have buttress of support rampant capitalism. We do not. I guess that's buttress. I'm not sure what that word is. But anyway, we can continue this out, Erin. And I may have to continue this on the other side too, because one or two things I want you to hash out. But this is On the Clock with Erin Greene. Erin is joining me via Zoom. I'm in studio hashing things out. Erin saying that we have an issue with inclusion and that we have a culture of exclusion. But we'll be right back after this.
July, August, September.
Bendy, what on earth are you doing now with all those red X's on the calendar?
I verified in person for my NIB pension today, so I'm crossing out all the months until I have to verify again.
Oh, yeah. By law, we are required to verify twice a year, in our birth months and then again 6 months later. It's important so we can continue to receive our benefit payments.
Yes, the friendly lady at NIB forms are available online at select retail locations and that you don't even have to verify in person. Once a sanctioned authority certifies your form, it can be emailed to verification@nib-bahamas.com or placed in the Dropbox at any NIB location.
NIB is making everything so convenient. The verification process is simple and it's all outlined on NIB's website and social media pages. At NIB, they're making it easier for you.
Vaccines protect those we love the most, our children and our grandchildren. I vaccinated my children to protect them. Getting your child immunized can protect them against diseases like polio, measles, whooping cough, and others. So protect your child today by getting them immunized. My grandchildren are vaccinated. You should do the same. Vaccinate your children and your grandchildren and make sure they are safe.
Take advantage of the National Vaccination Catch-Up Campaign, March 25th to April 6th, 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. On Saturday, March 25th, visit us at the Red Cross, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And on Saturday, April 1st, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we'll be at the Mall at Marathon. COVID-19 vaccines are also available at all locations. This message is brought to you by Parkville WHO, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and USAID.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
And welcome back to On the Clock with Erin Greene. I have a text for you. Erin says, I concur with Erin. The masterclass should have been set up on all urban renewal parks with flat screens showing the presentation. People could walk to the park and take advantage of it. The money that is being spent at the reception for fewer than 300 people is ridiculous. They would not need to take a bus to get the bougie Bahama. Thank God for the students, or no one would have been attended. That is an indictment. That is an indictment.
Yes. And Ms. Nuri, we haven't even mentioned, I know I get 3 minutes left?
I can let you continue. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, man. In accessibility for the family islands, right? Like, we don't ever talk about it. We don't ever talk about the extent to which family islanders drive this nation forward. And we have disregarded the family islands unless there's a foreign direct investment attached to it, right? We in fact, we have a prime minister that talks about, his decision to give the land or not. How could it be his decision? First of all, in 2023, don't we have a process legislated for the approval of FDIs that removes any personal influence from the discussion? I mean, mind you, I think all the bodies actually sit in the office of the prime minister, so that's a clear suggestion that I am living in the skies, right? My expectations are somewhere else on another planet. But what about family islanders and how far removed they are from the decision making about their own islands? We see in today's paper, families homeless after Bimini blaze. Let me grab the Guardian. I just missed it. 4 non-functioning fire trucks.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about it on the next side too.
You go to Abaco, the people them in Abaco have to beg foreigners to put together fire truck. The residents have to form volunteer fire teams. We got thousands of police officers in New Providence. We got thousands of people looking for work. We got thousands of Bahamian dollars not being spent on family islanders, and we only call them family islanders so they feel better about the ways in which we exclude them. The only way we could make them feel included is to call them family islands and not out islands. It is a culture of exclusion.
Yeah, a culture of exclusion. And you mentioned the issue with Bimini and the fire, and we'll talk about that on the other side too. You mentioned the COI, and today was birthed because of exclusion. And you mentioned what is happening in the FNM in terms of the constituency branch and the executive seems to be a disconnect, and they're both complaining about exclusion. And I have one person saying that the chairman and deputy chairman can attend any meeting, and that they don't need to be invited. But this is again not the issue. The issue here is that Kevin Harris in this particular incident saying that they are butting in. They don't want the constituency offices be independent or autonomous. So that's a conversation that needs to be had. What is happening inside in these?
I mean, the similar but different questions to be asked about the PLP. Is there a cabinet within the cabinet? Do the rest of them be having meetings when Mario Boleg and Glennis Anna Martin are busy looking after children?
Interesting.
Right? And so all of these discussions, all of these articles suggest to me, or, they all have a similar theme, that either they are the product of cultures and processes of exclusion, or that these problems could be solved by centering the principle of inclusion in the discussion. Even, in the Tribune Insight today, how does our nation gain from these resort developments, right? And it's looking at the number of new resorts. We just finished having a conversation about why are there so many documented and undocumented Asian migrants in our country. And then nobody has thought to ask, how are you having an immigration intensive response, but not having a conversation about where you're going to get the labor from? An article I didn't pull up for today in last week's Tribune with Keith Bell talking to the Tripartite Council saying, we need more labor. And I want to say to the Minister for Labor and Immigration, how you coming to us telling us you need more labor or you're going to have to get work permits. And we're sitting here asking you, how could you approve these projects knowing that you don't have enough labor or the local labor is not sufficiently Bahamians to maximize for the average Bahamian laborer, worker, skilled tradesman to maximize their potential benefit from these projects? You have excluded the average Bahamian, the Bahamian citizen, from your machinations, from your negotiations, from your policy making. It's as if we just didn't have to think about the Bahamian, then this whole planning thing would be so much easier.
I understand. But right now it's 11:03. Erin, I want you, before you go, give some recommendations on what should be happening for the 50th, because you have some concerns. Then we'll head and prepare for the next show on the next side.
All right. There was an indication that social media influencers would be hired. Get on it right away. Flood WhatsApp, social media platforms with multiple forms, different styles of engagement. You got comedians for young, upwardly mobile Bahamians. You got all genres of comedians and talented creatives out there. Get on it. Get these billboards around the place. Get them up. Here's the next thing. And maybe we talk about it on the other side. You don't have one paper calendar of events anywhere. You expect Bahamians to go online and navigate the internet to find out what's happening on their little phone? And they barely have data now? And they no Wi-Fi available? I mean, flood, inundate the same way that the Bahamian people had to row y'all for the mustard and yellow political campaign flyers everywhere. We're not mad that you did that. We're mad that you don't do it for anything else but that which is politically expedient. That's what we're mad about.
That's it. So we'll take our break now and for the news, and we'll be right back for Guidance Radio AM. Erin Greene will join us again. We'll continue this conversation, and then we'll add what is happening to the news and ask, what does this mean? This has been On the Clock with Erin Greene, and we will see you tomorrow.